Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you give me a little wave? I'm seeing lots of thumbs. Fantastic, fantastic. You're all looking very friendly when you wave there, so thanks so much for that. And there's an awful lot of you here today. I thought lots of you would have gone to the other session, but obviously analog to digital is a burning topic for an awful lot of you. So my name is Sam Watkins and I am Managing Director for Delta Wellbeing, and I am also one of the board members here at the TSA, and I'm delighted to chair the first half of today's session before handing over to my fellow TSA colleague Tim Mulray for the expert panel. So today I've been asked to talk a little bit about Delta Wellbeing's journey as we move from analogue systems to digital systems, and some of the experiences that we've had before I hand over to Alex, who's going to tell us a little bit about the work that Axis Group are doing in this area, and then over to Ian, who will give us the strategic director viewpoints for Bradford Council. Okay, so our experiences so far. So we all know that we've been talking about the analogue to digital switch for an awfully long time. So for us, those discussions started back in 2017, and that was really just about what could we do in this area. We had lots of information coming through from a Welsh perspective through the Learning Improvement Network, and we also had lots of information coming through from the TSA. But that was very much about the equipment and how would the equipment react when we switched over to a digital platform. So there was lots of awareness raising happening, but very little reality then. Let's say. People were talking about lots of really good things. For us, we didn't really want to go through that mirror image of what we had, and I think that's really what was on offer at the time. Then if we look at the cost element of it, specifically for us at Delta, I can share our experiences, and really I don't think the suppliers had any idea of how much it was really going to cost to transition. So back at that point we were having wildly different costs for us, from say £60,000 to transfer to £500,000. So there was a huge gulf, and how on earth do you get to the point where you fund that? Then we moved on to COVID, and I think for us as a tech industry, that's where huge opportunities have come about. So we started doing things much differently to what we'd traditionally done. For the older frail people that we were supporting, they became much more au fait with how to handle technology, much more comfortable with technology. And for us, we were doing different things over COVID. So our levels of confidence for our customers, for our consumers, just completely changed our thinking of what technology could do. And that's where it triggered for us a thought process of, we don't want to just swap out. We need this technology to really do the hard work for us and do something very different to support that health and social care integration. On the back of that, what we were being asked for from social care colleagues, from health colleagues, particularly coming out of COVID, was data. What's going on out in our communities? And because they knew we had the technology there, they were asking us for some of that data. And we actually found it quite difficult to get some of that data out of our system and to tie it up with other elements of the system, because that interoperability just wasn't there. So as part of our transition, we started to have really good conversations with commissioners of our service, senior leaders across health and social care, to find out what was the problem they were trying to solve, and essentially what mattered to the customers, to the patients that we were trying to serve. from that, we started to build a really good picture of the direction of travel we needed to go in. And last May, we published a pin, and we invited the sector to come and speak to us about what the art of the possible was. We probably spoke to about 20 suppliers, and we had really, really good conversations with lots of them about some amazing visions that they had for the technology. From there, we fed all of those views and the views of our stakeholders into a tender which we launched in October. And something really significant happened for us there then, in that when we opened up that tender and we started to have the questions, the reality was that a lot of the conversations we'd had with a lot of suppliers were their aspirations. Now, the switch to digital is happening. That date isn't moving. We need them to be ready now. And what we found was an awful lot of the suppliers coming to speak to us were speaking a really good language, but they couldn't deliver on it. So we had put within our tender some very, very specific dates about when we wanted this to go live and where we wanted that vision to go in terms of that interoperability and that integration with health and social care. And actually, there were a number of big players in the market that contacted us and said, we're not going to be bidding for your tender because what you're asking for is just not possible. And for me, particularly around my role with the TSA, that is so disappointing in terms of the ambition of the sector, because people need to collaborate. We've got some fantastic opportunities out there with lots of different suppliers, but they need to come together to deliver a model that is fit for purpose for our integrated health and social care systems. In January, we held some interviews, and I'm really pleased to say that we had a lot of support from some key partners such as Tech Cymru, the TSA, where we had some experts come along and support us with that interview process. We ran the interview in 2 parts, so we had a technical interview. So I'm not a particularly technical person myself, but I had some of the best in the business come along and really challenge some of those organisations that had bid to work with us. And then we had a strategic interview, and again we had some of the best in the industry, including the Chief Exec of the TSA, Alison Scurfield, who sat in on those panels to really make sure that we were having the best in class. And then, as some of you who follow us perhaps on social media would have seen, we have now appointed CGI as our preferred partner. But what's important to say is that CGI are an integration hub for us. So they will work with lots of different suppliers and bring together those technologies so that they are in one place, so that our call handlers within our monitoring centres are seeing a single pane, and we are working towards having a 360-degree view of our service users, the patients within our communities, so that we can work in a completely integrated fashion. And moving forwards, as we plan the mobilisation, we'll be spending now the next 6 months doing the swap out of the platform, but also working with key strategic leaders across Wales to make sure that actually this isn't just about swapping out the platform. This is about what the 5 and the 10-year journey looks like for true integration of health and social care. And I believe really, really firmly that the tech industry can really underpin that, can be the building blocks and do the heavy lifting, if you like, to support the wider sector, because we all know the recruitment challenges. You can't get GPs, you can't get nurses, you can't get social workers. But actually the tech industry has got some amazing staff working within it who can do a lot of the lower level work alongside some of the best technology that we've got. So that's our journey. Thanks for listening to my view of the world, if you like. And now I'd like to hand over to Alex, who will tell us a little bit about your work. Thanks.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Brilliant. So yeah, I'm Alex Nash. I'm head of assistive technology for the Access Group. And I'm going to talk a little bit about really my journey into this before I sort of hand it over. So my journey in this sort of sector really started in 2015, when my grandfather was given a red panic button, analog system. He was given this red panic button, and we were told that now you can sort of have some sense of security that he'll be okay, or if he isn't okay, he can press this button and somebody will respond. But my grandfather at the time had dementia. So we were saying, well, he's not used to this. How will he remember to press this if he needs help? Well, you need to remind him. So we need to remind somebody with dementia to press a button that he's never used to have before. Well, yes. And it just seemed very strange that was the only technology that was really available. So I sort of started my journey really looking at what could be improved on, what else could happen to really change this journey into something that encompassed the benefits for family members, more insight for local authorities and care providers. I built a company at the time called Alcuris, but one of the challenges that we had is that we'd built this system that would link in with door sensors, smart plugs, temperature sensors, pulling all this data together with some learning capability to learn an individual's changes in routines, smart alerts to automatically alert if somebody hadn't started their day or would normally make a cup of tea and hadn't that morning. So we could do all of that. We could send the alarms into monitoring centres. Great. But what we couldn't do was integrate with all the other bits of software and the capability. We were great in what we did. We had our nice little silo, which meant that for a local authority, they could install the technology, it would send messages into the monitoring centre, and the family could get some alerts. But actually, it didn't integrate with anything else. The local authority had their own case management system. The domiciliary care groups had their own systems for logging carers in and out. The health system had their own systems. The brokerage systems had their own systems. So what we'd really done is created a digital version, but another silo within a sort of landscape of products. So Access Group came along and approached me and said, actually, it would be really great if maybe we can combine and work together. And Access were a company that I had, frankly, never heard of before. And for those that don't know who Access are, we are the largest UK headquartered software company that I think nobody has ever heard of. So there's 6,000 people that work in the Access Group. And what really impressed me with Access is they had a whole range of software. So they had a case management system, Mosaic. They had a domiciliary care system, which was Access People Planner. They had 90,000 carers using their carer system that logged carers in and out. And they had Rio, which was a health system. They had a brokerage system, which was Adam. And they had a social prescribing system called Elemental. So suddenly, for the first time, I saw all the building blocks to actually move ahead of just being this siloed into actually having an end-to-end system that can be a frictionless approach, that can have an individual at the centre that follows them all the way through from a local government setting with social care, allowing families to have alerts as what's going on, to enable the carer, when the carer turns up, to actually see what's happening. Has there been an increase in bathroom visits? If so, let's have a conversation around a potential urinary tract infection. Pushing that data back into the case management system, but then also having this ability to flow through into Rio or Flow, one of our health products, to enable virtual wards. So that, for me, was the really exciting thing about being part of Access, is being able to integrate these products. Now, we're at the start of this journey. We haven't finished this integration yet. We've started the integration with one of our products, which is the care product, so domiciliary care providers can integrate, but we're only at the start of this journey. And I think with your points you're making earlier around this analog to digital transformation, I think my message is, there are two different ways of looking at this. One is looking at having a digital replacement of what you've currently got, but I think actually that's missing the point. The digital opportunity here is to totally transform the services that you're providing, moving away from a purely reactive-based model of care into a model of care that is far more proactive and therefore preventative. And I think that's really the opportunity here as service providers, as industry partners, in terms of what we can actually achieve with the digital transformation. So I'll pass it over. Please do come and sort of say hello later on, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Thanks, Alex. So I think Alex has made some really good points there around that frictionless approach, which I think is what we're all looking for, and how that data flows in and out of the system, which is absolutely critical if we're going to work in an integrated fashion and be really proactive about what we do. So now I'd be delighted to welcome on stage Ian McBeath, who is the Director for Health and Wellbeing at Bradford Council, to give us a Commissioner's perspective.
Can you hear me now?
Do you want to start?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So Ian McBeath. In the old days, they would have called me Director of Social Services in Bradford. Bradford City of Culture 2025. No round of applause, I'm very disappointed. Anyway, there we go. I'm just going to give you a bit of a Commissioner's perspective about how digital switchover is going to affect us. And Alan asked me to talk about what are the challenges, but how could we overcome them. So I've grouped the challenges sort of into three in a way, and these won't be unknown to anyone that knows about the analog to digital switchover that's on its way. So the first challenge I think I've noted down is the transition to a new alarm receiving centre. Now, all councils are different. Bradford happens to have its alarm receiving centre and its response service all in-house. So it's all under my control. In other places, that's been outsourced. It might even be with a housing provider, which complicates things by an extra degree. But my key concern, of course, is a risk to the 12,000 people that have got a pendant alarm or a community alarm in Bradford. There are about 1.3 million people in England who've got these devices, and we've got to make sure that this switchover happens seamlessly for all of them. So that risk is at the top of my list. So we need to procure a new ARC, and we don't necessarily have the right technical expertise in the council to do that, so we've got to look for that expertise. In fact, the TSA are going to give us a hand, and I'm going to be asking Sam for her expertise, having met her about half an hour ago. Thank you very much for that. But all of the councils will be in a similar position. If we've got an expert, we might have one, but that's all we'll have. So there's a challenge there. We've also got to think about the current providers and the fact they're going to be bombarded with all these ARCs looking for a new supplier all at the same time. There'll be a lot of competition and a very short time scale to achieve it in, so I see that as a challenge as well. But as the other two speakers said, we should be looking for the opportunities at the same time. There's a big housing provider in Bradford. There are 4 or 5 other smaller housing providers. They've also got an ARC that's separate from ours. Well, should we look at putting those together? What about the NHS? I'm also Director of Integration for the NHS in Bradford. We're not capitalising on those opportunities, so we're going to try and build that in to this very short window we've got before the switchover takes place. So we need to be thinking about that now and capitalising on those opportunities if we're going to spend some money. So number one is the ARC. Number two are the devices. Now, it feels risky to me to think, well, can we test the analog devices? Will they work on the digital network? Should we leave it at that and then replace all the analog devices over a much longer period of time? Or should we go for a safer option and replace that kit up front? And if we're going to do that, who's going to pay for it and how we're going to make that work as a business case? Again, I think there'll be lots of competition from all of the commissioners, all looking for devices at the same time. There's a semiconductor shortage, I'm told. That's going to add to my woes of buying this new kit. But again, my top risk is, will people's devices work on the day after their digital switchover date? And risks there around the battery backup. So most things have got a 1 hour battery. If your power goes down in the middle of the night, 1 hour's not enough. That's the time when you're going to need to press your button. So we've got to be thinking about that risk. And also the risk about installing new routers. Frankly, when I send people letters, I sent 500 letters about another subject the other month, and only half of people opened my letter. Are they going to open the letter about a new router's coming? And when the new router arrives, they're going to know what it is and know what to do with it. So I think councils have got a role to be telling people more than twice that this is on its way and what the implications might be for them. And that sort of leads on to my third challenge, which is about communications, because community alarms and the telecare sector is only one element of council services. There might be others that are affected by this switchover, so I'm trying to raise the profile corporately in the council as well. So just talking about how to overcome some of these challenges, I've come up with a bit of a checklist as you would expect. And of course, number one is plan now, don't leave it any later. I'm a little bit staggered, about 150 people up and down the country who've got my job. I'm a little bit staggered at how low down on their priority list this is. And so part of my role is going to be raising that with them at other conferences that I attend in my role with Bradford and also with National ADAS. Number two on my list of overcoming challenges is seeking that experience, is looking for the people that can help me at the right time to put that technical spec together and get this implemented. Number three is, silly though it sounds, a lot of councils have created a big corporate centre, which is where IT and procurement and HR and all those functions sit. And they've got competing priorities with the other council departments too. So it's to engage that corporate centre, particularly IT and procurement, to make sure all this goes through smoothly and they're aware of the risks as I am. And also give me the money to buy any of this new kit that I need to buy. Number four is build a team, so we're on with that already. Number five is communicate both within the council and with wider people in the Bradford district. Try and co-produce as much as we possibly can with people and maximise on the opportunity. If we're going to spend this cash, then let's get the best bang for our buck. Number six is seek those opportunities with other partnerships, the NHS, housing, there might be other private providers as well that we can get in with and implement something which is a bit wider and just not like for like. And number seven, and just going back to my point right at the start, is make sure we're risk assessing this, and so that when this switchover happens, we can guarantee that people's service continues and no one comes to any harm. Thanks for listening. Is that mine? No, never mind.
Can you hear me? Yep, cool. Okay, I've got some slides, hopefully. They told me there'd be a bit of delay coming up on screen, so here we go. Okay, so from, I guess, a TSA perspective, which is what I'm going to talk about now, these are some of the things that we're hearing from our, if you like, from our members, from our non-members, from the webinars we do and the various bits and pieces around some common issues faced. And the whole point of this session really is to call those out and say, okay, what are the things that are preventing people from getting on that road to analog to digital? So, number one, I guess this is something that comes up time and time again, is around the cost involved in the transition. So people have historically been used to, I don't know, spending £100, £120 on a bit of analog kit, plugging it into the wall of the user's address. They're paying the bill for the phone line, no problem, and continuing from there. And obviously, if there's some peripherals and things like that, fine. When digital comes along, there's a more than likely chance you're having to upgrade your peripherals as well as your unit, and also, I guess, the vast majority of the industry at the moment is built around SIM cards in terms of digital. SIM cards comes with a cost. Thankfully, not the cost that you would find from a commercial SIM, but still, you're talking about, say, 80p a week or something like that per device. So it's not insubstantial if you've got, as Ian said, 12,000 devices. That soon adds up. And you've also got the upgrade of the platform to take into consideration as well. Secondly, for those of you who've still on an analog platform, and I think thankfully we're kind of seeing some light at the end of the tunnel here, but there's been, we're in 2023, I think we started talking about this in 2017, and there has been a lack of a clear roadmap or certainly definitive timescales for the transition of the remaining analog platforms in the UK, and the impact of that has been people who've wanted to go down the road of digital devices, etc., or to sort of gradually go on that route have not been able to. But as I said, I'm hoping that by the summer certainly we'll see some movement on that. Number three is around interoperability. So again, one of the worries is that you spend some money on devices, then you upgrade your platform, and how do you know that the devices you've bought work with the platform that you're going to buy in the future? So again, we've had some discussions about that with lots of our membership, and it's about making sure that those interoperable protocols are deployed in those devices, and I'm going to come on to that shortly. Number 4 is evidence. So where is the evidence that analog will fail? Again, I'm being told, well, our manufacturer tells us that analog, they've been down to the test center, they've plugged their analog device in to the digital routers and everything works great. Sometimes we don't get that detail around the testing, just a bland kind of everything works well. And as I think Ian mentioned before, we've got not only the challenge of analog protocols failing, but also that mains power failure as well. So where there are no battery backups in place, or even a 1-hour battery backup in place, that's not sufficient to drive analog devices. And secondly, how reliable are those digital protocols? And finally, digital stock. So something that, again, people have said is they're trying to go down the digital roadmap, but they're not being provided with that digital stock in a time scale that suits their business need. Now, what we've found in that respect is that manufacturers do say to us, if you can guarantee us like a monthly order, so many units a month, if we can plan our shipments around that, then that's fairly beneficial for them. So in terms of funding, I guess what we've found, and I'll talk to Ian about this a little bit more in the panel session, but building a strong business case is quite important because you've obviously got to go to budget holders in your organizations and say, we are going to have to spend more money over the next 3 or 4 years migrating from analog to digital. There are grants available that can supplement some of these things. There is the possibility, I guess, of passing on some charges or some element of charges to end users. Whilst that's not very palatable and it risks people taking away their lifeline, which is what we don't want to happen. There is that challenge, and then finally, it's understanding what are the potential benefits of digital. So, will the devices that you deploy mean that there'll be less time spent going to site sorting out issues if you can actually rectify some of those issues remotely because you've got a digital unit and things like that. From an analog perspective, yes, we are expecting remaining analog platforms to starting to get rolled out from July 23, maybe even sooner than then. And it's just a question of maybe there's 50 or 60 left in the UK that are on analog platforms, so how quickly can they get transferred? And then it's about, and we've been saying this since November 21, stop buying analog only units. I know that it's pretty difficult to buy an analog only unit in the UK now, thankfully, but it's about buying units that are able to communicate in analog or digital mode. So if you haven't got a digital platform right now, at least buy a hybrid unit that can remotely change at the future when you get your digital platform. Interoperability, there is lots of evidence around in the UK. So from a TSA perspective, what we do is try and collate as much evidence from people who'll say, I've got this unit talking to this platform, because sometimes you'll go to the manufacturer and they'll say, yeah, we'll work with all platforms, but then sometimes trying to get manufacturers who are commercial competitors to work together with each other can be quite difficult and time consuming. So what we try and do is say, okay, well, we know for a fact these units are working in their hundreds with this platform, and here are some examples. We, as I've said, look for confirmation of that interoperable digital protocol. So for dispersed units, that is TS 50134-9 or SCAPE. For group living, it's BS 8521-2 or now IP. And we're also, as of today, launching our digital social alarm interoperability guidance, which is here. We have been working on this for about 18 months. It is quite a technical document. We've been working as part of Special Interest Group 10, which is SIG 10, which is a a collaboration of all of the key sort of manufacturers of digital social alarms in the UK, and it was about saying, okay, what do people need to know to make sure that stuff works with stuff from different manufacturers? So this guidance is published today, and as a commissioner, we're not expecting you to necessarily know the ins and outs of it. There'll be stuff in there that, you know, even the technical guys struggle with, but it's about kind of pointing towards that document and asking people to follow the guidance in there to try and make sure that we've got as much interoperability as possible. Now, quite often this comes up around the risk of analog. We are seeing an increasing failure rate across the core networks. It's not, because there's so little evidence in the telecare sector of individuals moving in their own homes from analog to digital, because BT paused their migration 12 months ago, and now they've come out and said, we're not even going to start looking at migrating any end users who have telecare equipment until March 24, so this time next year. In the short term or medium term, we're not expecting people to, if you like, move in their own homes from analog to digital, but what we are seeing a lot of is core network technology being upgraded. So about once or twice a month I'll get a call from a housing association or from a local authority, and they'll say 29 of our schemes just stopped communicating, and the first question will be like, right, what communications provide? Is it BT? Is it TalkTalk? Is it Sky? And quite often it comes down to, after a bit of investigation, someone like Sky or TalkTalk or Virgin have made some kind of network configuration in their core, not in the person's homes or in the schemes themselves, but in the core, and that's impacted on a whole load of stuff. So that's the impact of analog to digital that we're seeing at the moment. I've mentioned the maintaining of power, and what I would say finally from an analog perspective is digital units are able to provide a heartbeat functionality. At the moment, if you've got an analog unit, at best, and I know this isn't universally applied, but it should be, is that at best you'll get a voice call every 28 days from a user who'll, you know, phone in and say everything's okay. With the heartbeat and the periodical call functionality, you are pretty much aware, you know, minute to minute, day to day, of which units are online and which units are offline. And that can be a godsend and a pain in the backside, depending on how you look at it and how your networks are set up. But certainly that's the point in the future, is that you won't have to sort of wonder, are these units operational, are they switched on, and are they working? On the back of that, we are just about to release next month the industry call to action report. So this is something that was commissioned by NHS Transformation Directorate, and what we've managed to do is to not only conduct testing ourselves from a TSA perspective at the mainly at the OpenReach test laboratory. So what we're able to do is bring a whole load of different types of units down there and actually do that testing back into different platforms. But we also reached out to the industry and said, can you provide us with testing data that you've done already? So for example, Bradford were able to say, we've been down to London, we've taken our units down there, we've connected back to our platform, and here's our results. We made 100 calls and 80 of them were fine, and 10 of them were this, and 10, you know. So it's that kind of detail that we've asked for, because that's what we've not had from some manufacturers to date, so we had to basically go and do it ourselves. And this report, it actually details those tests down to call by call level, and also says, does the tests, did it connect successfully? Did it connect with one-way speech, for example? Did it not get through? Did it not disconnect? So it's all of those kind of nuances, and it makes some recommendations in there about you should not connect this device to this platform on this protocol. It's a moving feast, so the testing is really only as good as at the time you did the testing, and to be honest, there's not enough testing that's been done to date, but it's a good starter for 10, and we'll take it from there. And then finally, in terms of true digital availability, So I've mentioned the monthly orders to plan demand. When we sometimes people will have their kind of favorite manufacturers, so they'll go to them and say, oh, can you give us this stock? And it'll be like, yeah, we can't deliver for 2 or 3 months or whatever. But I did a digital webinar probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the majority of providers in that webinar, yes, they were all salespeople, but they all pretty much said, or the majority of them said, we can deliver within days and a couple of weeks. They weren't talking months. So I just wanted to make sure that really that if there's a perception that the stock isn't available, that's not correct. There are manufacturers out there with loads of stock or the ability to source stock quite quickly. So I just wanted to make that point clear. And then finally, and I've worked with a few authorities on this, sometimes if you go through your existing portfolio of alarms and peripherals, and you're kind of, some of the digital manufacturers will have the majority of peripherals, but they won't have all of them. So you might go, oh my God, they haven't got a vibrating pillow function or whatever, so we can't really order from them. But actually that is 0.5% of your entire base. So don't let sort of minor peripherals not being available put you off kind of placing those orders and getting on that road. Okay, so now I'm going to move into, I'm going to have to put my headphones on for this. I'm going to move into panel mode, and I'm going to bring a couple of chaps in at the end here and just introduce. So I'll get their job titles right as well. So first up next to Sam is Aaron Edwards, who's the National Programme Manager for Tech Cymru. And there's also Colin McFadden, who's the Digital Transformation Project Manager from Scottish Digital Office. So welcome both, and we'll give you some tough questions to soak you in. But I guess, and I'm going to sort of look to the audience for some questions as well, but just to kind of get you warmed up, because you've not had the opportunity to speak yet, so I thought, well, I'll throw something in direction. I guess, Aaron, if I start with yourself, from a Welsh perspective, what are you seeing as like the main challenges that are stopping people from moving from analog to digital from your perspective, and how are you sort of supporting those organisations through that?
I think it's a bit similar to what Sam said. There's a bit of market immaturity, so are the platforms ready to cope with the current way that services kind of deliver their services? So we are seeing more and more cloud-based platforms sort of coming to fruition a little bit and being able to cater for what the requirements are. So it sort of starts with that solid request for proposal document, an RFP, which states your specification, and we've developed one that can be shared with people. Just come and grab me after and I can share a load of stuff with you. That sort of starts the ball rolling from a tendering process. But one of the biggest obstacles we found in Wales is there's a lot of smaller services, so 7 ARCs. I've just got large ones like Delta and Galw Gofal, and then the rest are sort of on average 5,000 connections. And they all want to maintain their ARCs. That's the first question we ask them, is you're still committed to delivering your ARC. So we'll work with them on getting them migrated, and we did that with the Vale of Glamorgan, case in point. We actually wrote off to Welsh Gov and got some funding to fund the first 12 months of that, so cost wasn't a barrier. And Gary, who's in the audience from the Vale, was able to reinvest the money he saved in buying that platform for the first 12 months into Digital Kit. And now they've got roughly 800-900 Scape-enabled Chiptech 7s on the go. So we're starting to grow the digital stock across Wales. The other thing I think going forward is what we took from that is they went live in August of last year. We're in sort of a post-12-month remediation phase now, where we're taking the lessons learned from that migration, and we've populated a project plan. So it's basically 62 tasks, right the way through from writing your request for proposal document through to go live, and all of the data review points along the way as well. Takes on average for 5,000 connections, around about 7 months, all being told. And the biggest barrier for that go live date to be achieved is proprietary protocols if you're moving from a platform that operates in that manner. So we noticed that 62% of all of the Vale of Glamorgan's connections were using proprietary protocols. And in an analog environment, it's not a case of simply updating those to be open. It's a case of either pressing the alarm and doing it, reprogramming it via the alarm platform. or physically calling that person to do that and make that in. So that is the single longest task of those 62 tasks, and it will take you roughly sort of 50 days to complete that. It depends on the resource you throw at it. And then even then there's some to mop up. So that's the biggest barrier, I think, is dedicated project management resource, business analysis resource, and us trying to sort of be able to bridge that gap and swoop in with the likes of Sarah and Rebecca, who are my colleagues who are going to be leading the rest of the migrations going forward.
Perfect, thank you, Aaron. And Colin, could you give us a bit of an overview about some of the steps? And I know there's quite a big deal went out last week as well, but what are Scottish Digital doing for your members at the moment?
Okay, so we have 31 health and social care partnerships, 100 or so housing associations and 23 ARCs in Scotland. Our programme's been running since 2017, and really to try and address the first aspect that Aaron brought up there of the project management resource, we created a playbook. It's an online resource for really taking everything from how to create a project team all the way through implementation. And that's a web-based resource for anyone based in Scotland to be able to access and to help. Templated guidance, documents along those lines. So that has been helpful in trying to break through this project management backlog, because there are partnerships we have which have been trying for 9 months to recruit a project manager and just locked in, not getting anyone suitable to apply. So it helps them get through that. In terms of alarms and alarm provision, which again is a significant issue, we are, sorry to counter you, Tim, on this one, but we are seeing a supply issue.
Okay.
Not that you're wrong, obviously there are a number of suppliers out there who are willing to supply, but we have 2 main suppliers in Scotland, and both of them do have supply issues. So when you are kind of locked into one of those, and I'm trying desperately not to name and shame by any means, but when you are locked into one because of proprietary issues, then there's very little people can do to get around that, at least with the kit that was in the market up until very recently. There might be providers in here at the moment who will have words to say about that as well. But that's been a significant issue. And we've tried to provide as much help as we can with meet the supplier events and trying to engage with the industry as a whole to try and get around that as well. And then lastly, as you alluded to, we've tried to provide innovation to the sector by bringing a shared ARC process. So this is an intent to have a single cloud platform for Scotland, not a single shared ARC centre itself. The services will all be able to keep their own ARCs themselves up and running, but one shared ARC provider with all the benefits of cloud and the shared procurement and training that will bring into play.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to open it up to the audience at the moment. I think there is a roving mic, I'm not sure, or might be wrong. Are there any questions that anyone wants to ask? We've got one down here. If you want to introduce yourself and ask away. Maybe point it towards one of the panel rather than me.
Thanks ever so much. I'm Mark Williams from the Local Government Association, and thanks ever so much for the presentations today. We have a wide range of guidance and facilities provided by OpenReach and communications providers and testing of equipment on telephone lines. Should tech suppliers and manufacturers do more to openly host their testing for customers of their suite of products?
Okay, I think
and that's to anyone.
I think that might be to me. So yeah, I think as part of the work I alluded to before, which was the sharing of test data, there have been some challenges getting some of the suppliers to share their test data that they've conducted. And when I've challenged them around this, and that guidance I put up on screen before, the reason that they're not prepared to share is they said they don't want to encourage people to stay with analog. So if they put something down on paper which says we've tested things and everything is fine, then they're saying that will almost encourage people to stay with analog rather than moving to digital. And I did say at the time, you need to kind of feed that back to the salespeople who are telling people, you know, stay with analog. But so the steps we've taken is to raise it with central government, raise it with the LGA, to put pressure on from a DAS perspective, and to really try and put the pressure on those organisations. But in the absence of that testing results, we've just had to, as I've said, do it ourselves, ask our members, ask our colleagues to do it as well, and then just collate that data ourselves. So yeah, it's not been a satisfactory outcome from that perspective so far, but hopefully we can you know, keep that pressure on. Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience? No? Okay. I'll go, Ian. So, as part of the, obviously you're at the early stages of that transition process, and I mentioned kind of the business case before. Has anyone from within Bradford, I guess, come to you and said, look, we've done the numbers, this is the kind of size of the issue we have from a cost perspective. I know that you've mentioned the risk of analog, the risk of digital migration is inevitably there will be some analog devices that remain connected, that will be without battery backup, that kind of thing. Has anyone put a business case in front of you that says this is what we think that this whole thing will cost, and what's been your sort of reaction to that?
I've not seen the number yet. It's probably going to be a scary one, but we're just at that point now. I mean, I suppose my advice to others in the audience would be, it's probably worth splitting the ARC number from the rest of it, because the ARC feels absolutely essential and needs to be transitioned, and we could probably get caught up in the cost of the other equipment and a negotiation about whether that's absolutely essential. So I'd say split those two and get the ARC done first.
Yeah.
I mean, my line with members and with the corporate centre and finance will be, it's not a nice to have, but we've got to do it. We are charging people for it, so we collect more than £500,000 a year in charges from people that use the service, so it's got to work. And there's a safety issue here. We've got to get over it. So it's not going to be a negotiable thing for me. It's going to be, we need to provide this. I mean, I suppose Bradford's in a situation where we haven't had an investment programme. That means we've got absolutely brand new stuff there that's going to be wasted. We ought to have been keeping up with this. So again, I've got another sort of in my armoury to say we ought to have been doing this beforehand, so we're almost catching up as well.
Yeah.
But that'd be the advice, split the two, but go in saying it's just an essential, and of course the alternative is we might have to put care in, or care checks, or another service, and that'd be even more expensive. So there's a business case just on that basis alone.
Okay, thank you, Ian. And I'm sort of constantly scanning the room, so put your hand up if you want to ask anything. Sam, I guess going around the country, one of the biggest challenges that I hear from particularly local authorities is sometimes from a funding perspective, the inability to kind of have built those relationships with their sort of health counterparts. Now I know that is in Wales, it's a lot more of a closer working relationship, but I wonder if you give an insight into kind of how you've built quite strong relationships across that divide over the years.
Yeah, okay. So I think for us, COVID, as I alluded to as part of my presentation, was a big turning point for us. And I think lots of organisations have found that where the barriers just came down literally overnight. And I think everyone was a little bit stuffed. We had nothing left in the tank unless we worked together, and it really forced that. So from that point, we started to build that trust very, very quickly. And for us now, it's about not letting that slip back. And we're very fortunate that through Welsh Government we get a lot of funding for some of these activities. So specifically within West Wales, we had some Welsh Government funding through transformation funds to really start that journey for us, which was just over that COVID period. So what that's allowed us to do is to demonstrate the value of technology and not look at it as a service on its own, but part of the wider infrastructure of health and social care delivery. So when we talk about how many bed days we can save, when we talk about packages of domiciliary care, where there are no domiciliary carers out there, that recruitment market is really challenging. What do they put in as, a director of social services as the safety net? If you've got a couple of hundred people waiting for domiciliary care and have nothing, there is a risk because you've assessed them as needing something. And I think technology can really support in that agenda. So for us, it's about kind of really fronting up the capabilities of technology and building on the trust that was developed through COVID, and we don't want to let that slip back.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Aaron, one of the things Mike Emery mentioned this morning in the plenary was around rural infrastructure, and being a resident of Wales myself, as well as I think we've got the majority on the panel here. What sort of challenges are you hearing about, obviously the move to digital being at the moment quite heavily reliant on SIM, and we all know about roaming SIMs and dual SIMs and all that kind of thing. You've talked about the Vale of Glamorgan, but the Vale of Glamorgan and some other parts of Wales are quite different, and I don't know whether you've had any thoughts, any challenges about how that is resolved?
Yeah, okay, I'll start from the beginning with what we did with the Vale when it comes to the equipment. So once they'd migrated their platform, we went out and procured 12 different devices from manufacturers, and we spent the day with the Vale's management team, but also their installation officers. We've developed a 40-question sort of checklist, like a weighting matrix on what bits of kit kind of work well, right the way through from aesthetics through to connectivity, compatibility. The way the Vale have landed on it is they've gone with Chiptech 7, that scored the highest within our day. So they've gone down the dual SIM route, which obviously does present issues when you're working towards sort of the western side of the Vale, sort of southeast Wales, southwest Wales. So it's a bit more challenging from a rural perspective, and they have obviously come up against those sorts of issues. So they've gone down the route of getting a broadband alarm in as a backup. So they're going to go, their choice obviously was to go down the dual SIM route. So in sort of roughly, you need 2G obviously to carry carry the signal across, which 97-98% coverage in the Vale of Glamorgan. So it's, again, it was like you were saying earlier about the assets in the field, 0.5%. It's got to be a manageable number. That is a manageable number as far as the Vale are concerned. So they've obviously got a series of broadband kit in as the backup, but they are going down the dual SIM route as they see it as the most effective way, and you don't have to worry about battery issues, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah. That's what they've done.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Aaron. Colin, one of the things that I think has been really impressive from the Scottish Digital Office was that focus on cyber security, the assured supplier list and things like that. I know there's been some pausing of that potentially. I know that Andy's moved on, but what are the kind of next steps for that? And can you just give a bit of an overview of that assured supplier list and the kind of steps that manufacturers need to take? Because there is a concern as we move to digital that there's a lot of more cybersecurity risks that are being opened up.
Yeah, absolutely. So the assessed suppliers list is essentially a once for Scotland approach to do all of the checks that you'd expect a local authority would have to do themselves, but to try and do it to prevent them having to, but also to prevent a supplier having to do it 30 odd times themselves. Our Chief Cybersecurity Officer, who is sadly no longer in the organisation, hence the scheme is paused for the moment, created this. He signed NDAs with every single supplier on the market that made them actually willing to trust them in that sense. And the interactions began. The scheme is essentially based around an external pen test and then a series of questionnaires on their patching and security methodology to make sure that any updates are actively considered, and all of the methodology around making sure it remains secure ongoing. When an organisation came and applied to be on, they got all these questions, they had to provide evidence, and there were 3 outcomes. which have all happened. There was a straight, no, you're not secure, be gone. There was a, Amber, there's a couple of major issues, but nothing massively significant. Therefore, we'll let you on, but you've got 6 months to fix this, which is by far the most common solution out there. And then the last one was straight, yeah, you're fine, we're on. And this scheme is published and publicised every time someone comes onto it. So it's not periodic, but essentially as soon as someone's worked through the scheme and on, they're provided out to the Scottish organisations. And they're on that essentially until something major changes. And so, for example, Tunstall SaaS platform moved to its new IP upgrade, I think last week. That is significant enough that although it was on, that will now need to be reassessed. So it's that sort of level of change that we're talking about. The scheme, essentially when we're saying the scheme is paused, that is paused for anyone new coming on, because until we've got new CISO in place, we're not willing to do that. So we need someone to be of a high enough level to do that, and I'm not touching it. We're out for recruitment for that at the moment, so hopefully within a couple of months at most, we'll have that back up and running, because we do have a waiting list from several suppliers in the room at the moment. On top of that, we do have one other piece of work that's ongoing, which is essentially a sort of cybersecurity dongle, if you like. It's more to it than that, because the main aspect of that, or the main intention behind that, was to try and get round the cyber resilience, as you pointed out. Landline had two major issues, say, last year. One was cybersecurity, because there were very few alarms out there that had either Now IP or Soundlec to be cyber secure. And as we pointed out several times, battery resilience. So your alarm, whichever alarm provider you pick, will be there for at least 24 hours. But the router in the house is going to be dead after an hour, 2 hours at most. So some way of getting around that, and that's probably the next step that we're trying to build in as well.
Okay. And in terms of that assured list, is it, I know it's in the playbook, but is it available for viewing from organisations outside of Scotland? Would they be able to see that or not?
It is actually on the inside of the lot, so not technically, but I'm not sure there's a reason necessarily why we couldn't share it, so I can go back and check on that one with the rest of it. But
okay. I mean, it might be more valuable once you've had the chance to, we don't want people to get worried because the company they want to maybe procure are not on the list because there's been a backlog. So maybe once that backlog is cleared, then... Yeah,
and that was something we had to try and spend a while getting the Scottish authorities' heads around, was just because it's not on the list doesn't mean it's not secure and you should avoid it. Yeah. It is not necessarily processed through. And there's a couple of suppliers that didn't actually put their devices forwards. That's, again, not saying they're insecure, they just haven't integrated with us. So if it's not there and you want it, you go back out and do your own tests yourself. Yeah, sure, that'll be fine. But
okay, thank you. Any questions from anyone? I think we've got about 3 minutes left. Okay, yeah, question down here. Thank you.
Thanks. Ed Willis, part of Partners in Care and Health, the partnership between Local Government Association and Association of Directors of Adult Social Services. It's just a question to Ian. You mentioned partnership with housing and also with industry. I wondered if you had any sort of tips or advice on that latter engagement and having that discussion in a sort of open way.
Thanks for the last question, Ed. It used to work for me. that was revenge. Using your existing partnerships has got to be tip number one. It's amazing how fragmented local government can be at that level, and housing that's in-house, housing that's out of house, what a complicated landscape it can be. But there aren't any care decisions that are made that aren't also housing decisions, so we've got to be together, and so that there should be some natural partnerships there, even if there have been falling outs in the past, and I know about some of those, but it's probably time to get back together again. This is not a part of the world really the NHS have really grasped to date. And virtual wards, people might have heard of this virtual wards pilot that has been running for about a year, where the NHS have dabbled a little bit with technology, telehealth more than telecare, but there's more of that they could do, and again, this could be an opportunity for them. So I'm talking about the cost and the business case. There might be a way of ameliorating some of the costs by sharing some of the infrastructure and getting the arrangements in place. In terms of industry, Ed and I used to work for Hertfordshire. It's quite a different place to Bradford, and there's an enormous self-funder market there, and people are prepared to pay quite substantial amounts of money to make sure their families are safe, and people are prepared to pay for that safety as well. So thinking about self-funders and what do they want and how can they access some of these services, don't just have to be people that receive council services. So that feels like an opportunity as well. So some early partnership working as part of the plan feels like it would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. I think we're pretty much out of time now. Is there room for one last question? If not, we're going to, oh yeah, sorry, Colin.
No, it's just if no one else has anything, I just wanted to follow on from something Ian said earlier about costs.
Yes.
So we've obviously had maybe a bit more time than some of the English authorities to look at this. We've had quite a lot of partnerships that have been looking at particularly SIM costing, and on average we've probably been looking at about £5 a month a user, which is roughly what you were saying as well. And because quite a lot of the partnerships have got bundled SIMs, so first 2 years or so with New Alarm as free SIMs, no one has got round to a point yet where it's really starting to bite. But every single authority has said they're almost certainly going to have to raise the costs. It's something we'll probably be looking at this year in terms of how much they're going to be looking at. But certainly all of them are now looking at saying they're going to have to look at trying to raise this in some manner. The other thing is about the overall cost of a programme, and again I would utterly back Ian what he's saying about splitting the two projects into related projects. But one thing we have noticed in terms of people bringing forward business cases is quite often it's been quite a large sum, which is not incorrect when you count it, but it's been, when the sum first hits, it's been the cost of essentially an entirely new telecare service, which is almost not taking into account the business as usual cost. So when you ignore the cost or subtract the cost for analog provisions from that, it does bring the cost back down again. Not into a manageable system, I appreciate, but into a slightly less unpleasant aspect as well.
No, it's well said. Thank you for that, Colin. So with that, I'd like to wrap up the session today, and if you could just pass on your thanks to the panel here, and thanks all for coming. And enjoy the rest of the conference, and see you all soon.